Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Vermont Department of Libraries for our webinar. I'm Vin Lavodi, for those of you who don't recognize me. It is my pleasure to introduce Kassie Tibbott. Kassie Tibbott is the CLIC Coordinator. So CLIC stands for the Community Legal Information Center, and it is financed by an annual grant from your friends at the Vermont Department of Libraries. But it is housed at the Vermont Law School. CLIC is operated by Vermont Law School librarians and staff and offers free legal reference services to the general public. Kassie, as the CLIC coordinator, she has many sort of functions and jobs, but her main tasks are to manage the grant from our department, create and update CLIC policies and procedures. She fills written case requests from incarcerated individuals, and she provides basic reference assistance to public patrons. It has been a pleasure to work with Kassie. She joined the staff in the summer.
Last December.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe how fast it's been.
Yeah.
So we've had lots of fun intersections, and she joined us in Arcel in the fall, so it's been a pleasure. In addition to her work with CLIC, Kassie is also a research fellow for the Center of Justice Reform at the Vermont Law School and a volunteer criminal record expungement attorney for Vermont Legal Aid. She's also an advocate for restorative justice, and she hosts voter registration drives and poetry groups at Vermont's correctional facilities. She also volunteers at COSA, which is the Circles of Support and Accountability, and that's a team. And then she also has reparative panels at the Rutland County Community Justice Center. So that's pretty cool. She earned her JD from Vermont Law School, and she has a BA in Spanish from MSU in Denver. Kassie is an Iowa native, but she plans to be a lifelong resident of Barnard, and we welcome her.
Thank you, Vincent. It's a pleasure to be here. Today I will start by sharing photos of our space so you can kind of have an idea of what CLIC looks like, and then I will talk about our legal reference services and then introduce you to the Ask a Law Librarian service. After that, I'll switch gears a little bit and talk about online resources that are available, which is very helpful for those of you who have individuals who come in who are maybe seeking legal assistance or doing legal research on their own, and they're unable to come to CLIC or almost may not even need to because the resources are available online for them. So we'll get started. And for those of you who have not been to CLIC, it is located in the Julian and Virginia Cornell Library at Vermont Law School, as Vincent said, in South Royalton. That picture was taken a couple months ago. It's not today. We have a little bit more snow than that. But so that's the main entrance to the library. And then once you walk in, you will see CLIC's rooms, which are to the left. This is the main one. And a couple snapshots to show you that we have two research terminals there, a printer, there's a scanner outside and photocopier, and then we have a large collection of legal self-help materials, which are there as well. So it's a nice bright space. And then on the other side of the hall, there is another space. It just has one more terminal. It's like a stand-up. It's basically, just like a really tiny space, like a closet, to stand there and do research if you needed to. So we have a total of 3 terminals. And then there's also another computer to search Julian, which is the Vermont Law School's library catalog. So once an individual is at the library, even though this is the CLIC space for the public to use, an individual may request to look at something while in the library, and someone will retrieve that for them. So an individual does have access to almost everything at the law school library, which is really great. And so all of this said, the research databases are kind of the main thing that people come to use. And so the majority of things that are offered at CLIC are for walk-in use only. And those items are those legal databases. We have non-legal databases available as well as environmental databases. So for the legal databases, Westlaw and Lexis Advance are the most popular, and that's what the majority of attorneys use if they can afford it. Many attorneys come in and use CLIC to do legal research, especially solo practitioners and individuals who don't have large budgets in their office. So it's really great because then they're able to help more clients. And other legal databases would be Hein Online. That's a law journal library. It's really great. And then we have Columbia International Affairs. It's a very comprehensive source for theory and research in international affairs. If that's something an individual needs, we have Gale One File, criminal justice, and various databases in that realm. So then for the non-legal databases, this is where you'll find dictionaries. We have health and wellness databases. We have a database that you can access to get journals that cover science and psychology and other things like that. So not specifically legal, but maybe legal in nature as far as what you're researching those things for. And then Vermont Law School has a large environmental collection, both in book, in print, and then online, and then these environmental databases that are available as well. So we have a lot of environmental lawyers in the area and a lot of people with property issues, land use, different things like that. So it's a really great space to come and get all that information as well. So we have Vermont legal materials, a lot in print, a lot online. Again, a lot of it's online, and so that's why we have the 3 research terminals. Just so then if someone's in there drafting a document, then there's always going to be more than one terminal available to use these databases. Our self-help books are mostly all Nolo, that's the brand of the company. Those are really great because it really boils down an issue. So we have a title for any legal issue you can think of, any life event you can think of, where maybe a contract would be needed or anything like that. And so it's a great place to start. You can access the book, copy a template, a form. You could, fill it out there and then use the photocopier, fax machine if you needed, scanner. And so it's a good place to start. And then those books will then reference other things that one could find with the other resources at the library. Other things would be the various technology that I mentioned. I'm a notary public, and so when I'm at the library, there's a notary public service available. There are others on campus who are notary publics, and we're working on getting more librarians to be notaries as well. So it's a sometime service, and we have a newspaper reading room, and so there you could come in and read different magazines, newspapers, and things like that. So, so that's about it for our legal reference services, or those are the main ones that individuals come in to use. And so let's say you're a member of the public, you come in, you're in this academic library, it's a little overwhelming, but you're capable of helping yourself through an issue, but you don't know where to start. And so sometimes starting is the most difficult place. And that's what the law librarians are there for. So there's always a reference librarian on duty. They aren't always available immediately, but we do have a Ask a Law Librarian service. And so if no one is available, immediately, then you could call or send an email. And it's the Ask a Law Librarian service is specifically if you are looking for just help getting started, because law librarians are unable to provide legal advice. They are unable to do legal research for you. And unfortunately, some people are kind of looking for that type of assistance. And so that's kind of where the conversation would later will kind of go into. You've probably, maybe as a librarian yourself, have been in that situation, or you may have a legal question yourself, or a family member or something, and so it's kind of just like, what do we do? Where do we go? So the Ask a Law Librarian service, as you can see, these we have magnets. So it's kind of me just advertising this magnet that we have that I'll offer at the end. But the law librarians usually respond within 24 to 48 hours, and it can help provide guidance about how to use the legal resources. And just it's really great to have them there because they can help walk through and show you how to use many of the things that are there, and then describe more in detail what everything is for and when you should use it. And so for those who come in seeking legal help, legal assistance, just sometimes you can get to a certain point in your research and then you realize I need an attorney. So I've been working on putting together lists of potential sources for that, because I think that's maybe one of the biggest questions that we receive from librarians, is that someone comes in and you know they need an attorney and they might not know it, or maybe they do, and you don't want to send them to the wrong person because then they'll come back. It's a frustrating situation to be in when you have a legal issue. And as a librarian, I assume that you like to be able to give your patrons something, never just turn them away or tell them you can't help them. And you don't want to give them bad information because, again, you were their starting point. They'll come back to you, and you don't want to have a frustrated patron. So let's see. What we do now if someone asks us a question. So then it's kind of the question of what should you do, because you are not in a law library and you do not have all of the resources available that we do at CLIC. So that comes around to the online resources that are available. And there are quite a few of those, but it really depends on what an individual is looking for or needs, if that makes sense. It's an attorney's favorite line or answer to a quick question is "it depends." It's really frustrating to a lot of people, but it really does depend, and that is the answer. And so that's always kind of a good placeholder. Say, well, it depends. But as a librarian, you're probably not a law librarian and you're probably not an attorney. And so you can't start guiding the conversation or asking questions in a way that would then make it seem like you were going to provide advice, or like you, by finding out more questions, would be able to send an individual to the right case. If a patron comes in and they're looking for this book, but they can't remember what it's called, but they know that there was a whale, or they know the character's name or the color of the cover, of course you can be, oh, I think I know what you're talking about. You go and you get the book, and maybe you grab a couple others because you're not entirely sure which book it is. If you bring them the wrong book and they read a new book, no harm, no foul. If you bring them the right book, that's great. They'll come to you again for a book that they're looking for. But then if someone comes in a similar situation and they're looking for a certain case, and they might remember a couple of facts or what the ruling or the holding was, and they might say, well, this was part of the story. And even if you feel like, I think I know what case they're talking about, or they tell you, the time, like, oh, it was between 1990 and 1995, a date range, you can't lead them to that case, and say, I'm pretty sure this is the one you're looking for, because perhaps the argument that they're drafting or the motion that they're submitting hinges on that case. And so they, relied on you to get, because you're someone with authority that they trust. And then you, even though just trying to help them, said, I think this is what you're looking for, or, and then they relied on that. That's the unauthorized practice of law, and that could come back and create an issue, especially if they realize that it was maybe the wrong item to rely on, and that they truly believed that you were providing advice to them and leading them to use that information. It's very similar to just finding the law. So we receive phone calls from individuals who were at their library and they were just looking for the drone laws, wherever they live, or something that feels really specific and simple. Those aren't ever specific and simple, but it's just knowing where to send the individual, like what website. So like most of Vermont's laws are available online. One of the librarians at the law school has put together a really great Vermont legal research guide, and so that is on the list of the online resources that I have here, and it will, let's see, sorry, it looks pretty bright green from over here, but so the Vermont Legal Research Guide gives you links to the Vermont Constitution, for Vermont court decisions, which I did see on the Department of Libraries. They link to Vermont Supreme Court decisions. There's legislation. There's all types of things that you can do online. It's just figuring out how to use and navigate those websites, and it's okay to help people with that. As you know, you're just typing in what they're telling you. You know, you're not thinking of, oh, here's how we should look it up. And that's a really great research guide. And if you go to the CLIC website, there's direct links on the right-hand side to all of these resources, but you could probably always plug them into Google and find them as well. So judiciary court forms are another thing. Sometimes people just need a form. You know, they want to file a divorce. They need to, I don't know, sell a car. Maybe that's not a judiciary court form, but those are forms that you can find online or that you can find on the self-help books. So there's that, and then there's a social services directory, which is always really great. There's also a link that lists most of Vermont's publications and newspapers, and the law school has also just published a legal toolkit for Vermont farmers. It's a very specific thing, but I thought that I would include that because there are many Vermont farmers. And so those are some of the legal research resources. And maybe you know that some of them existed or where they are, but I've tried to compile them all into one place. Just because if you're not that close to South Royalton and you can't send someone, or someone cannot make it down to CLIC, there are some ways that you can navigate around that, which would be starting to go to CLIC's website, and that will kind of link you to maybe anything you're looking for. And if an individual comes in with a specific request, they know the case. They know exactly, you know, they have the citation, they know exactly what the law is, you know, what under what title and what section, and you aren't able to help them locate it, you can call the Ask a Law Librarian line, and we are able to provide that information to you because you know exactly what you need. We're not helping you figure that out, or, you know, choosing which case we think, you know, you wanted. And so that's really great. That's part of the inmate service. Incarcerated Vermonters are able, they have a Lexis Advance right now. They have legal research databases in the facilities, for example, and they don't have the option to print. And so they will write down case names, send them to us, request up to 5, and then we will plug them into the computer, print out the results, and then mail them back to them. And so we can do the same thing for someone who's really far from the library and just needs that one case. You know, we're happy to type it in and then send it out in an email, or print it, photocopy it, and send it, whichever way. So we're trying to make things a little easier. But then again, if it's not a specific request and you say, well, I need to just do some research on this topic, it's like, okay, great, come on down. You know, I can't do that research for you. And so that comes around to when an individual comes into your library and you're thinking, this seems, you know, like peeling back an onion of sorts. Like, I don't want to get into this. And you don't have to, and you can safely hide the, you know, I'm not an attorney, I can't practice law, and doing legal research for you is the unauthorized practice of law. And so individuals understand that when you tell them. Doesn't mean it's less frustrating, but it's good to then have the tools in your belt to say, I can't do this for you, but I can help you help yourself. And here are the resources you could start with, and then, you know, see where it goes from there. And it always, like I said, it comes down to an individual usually needs an attorney. Attorneys are not always available. They're not always cheap. And it really depends on what's going on. So what I've done is I've created these flowcharts, one for each Vermont county. And if you're not into this like flowchart form of things, it also, there'll be a list on the back of each page. but it's a place to start. So it's this libguide that you access and you click across the top which county you're from. The example here is Washington County. And so you start, and the first question is, do you need legal assistance for a civil legal issue? If the answer is no, you're on the wrong flowchart. But if the answer is yes, it basically says, look, there's a lot available in your county. Some stuff you probably know about, some you may not. And the flowchart looks a little confusing, but it's a flowchart. So once you start following it, it's easy. And it breaks down specific situations, like if this is an environmental law issue, contact these individuals. If it's an unlawful discrimination issue, contact these individuals, consumer complaint, etc. So it breaks down the organizations and resources available for very specific issues in each county. And then once you get past that, then there are still other resources, but it's based on, again, the issue, but sometimes income. So basically, in every county in Vermont, there are resources available like freelegalanswers.com, and an individual is able to post up to 3 civil legal questions per calendar year. There is a little intake at the beginning. There is an income requirement. I don't know exactly what it is, but most of the individuals that I refer there are able to use the service. And then you talk, volunteer attorneys are on the other side of the screen, and they're able to answer, talk back and forth as much as needed until the answer or the issue is resolved. It all has to be on the computer though, which is a little unfortunate because sometimes a phone call is so much more helpful. Sometimes, sending some emails or meeting in person, but the attorney this has to do it all online there. So it's not totally accessible for all Vermonters for a number of reasons. But that is something that if, an individual is at your library, hopefully you have a computer available or, maybe know where one is. And so then you could help them, navigate that or draft their questions and things like that. So that's a really helpful thing. And then if there's a clinic in the county or just other Vermont Bar Association. So this is always nice to at least, because we have individuals who come in and we just print this out, because if you hit print, it prints a flowchart on one side and then just a list by table of the resources on the other side, which is really helpful because then, if you want them to leave with a thing, that's what I was always told, like everyone leaves the library with a thing. You don't leave them with nothing, or they don't leave with nothing. And so it's always a good place to start. So I feel like I just kind of threw all of that out there to see what sticks and what's relevant to your library. And so the next, or the plan is then to figure out what more could CLIC offer for your library, for your patrons. Maybe each county is different. It really depends on the types of questions that you receive and answers that you're trying to give. And so CLIC is here to, if anything has the word legal in it and it feels intimidating, we're happy to field anything, but it's always nice if you're able to, if it could kind of actually be a simple answer, but you never really know until you get into the weeds a little bit. And so the projects moving forward then would be, kind of based on feedback that's received from librarians. I guess, like I said, depends on the types of questions that are asked and location, because some of these flowcharts even are a little bare. In some of the counties, some of the flowcharts only have the statewide services on them, and well, those are statewide, so sometimes they're not as responsive. It really depends. So I thought maybe I would open up this portion to initial questions of any follow-up questions on the services that I've mentioned. Like I said, I know I put a lot out there, and then, or just maybe, what we could do moving forward to connect CLIC with your library.
So could you talk a little about the outreach that you can do, like on site? You can go to a library, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if a librarian wanted to invite you to come, what would that look like?
Sure. I could come on site, and we have what they call it, like the horse and pony show. We could bring books to actually. It's always really it's great to be able to access, like, let's say the Vermont statutes online, but it's also good to conceptualize or just, say, okay, here's the actual book that I would have looked, because some libraries do have the collection of the Vermont statutes annotated, so I'd be happy to come and help, do like a training of how to navigate those books and how to maybe, follow legislation. But then it could also be, short, brief role plays of, a client comes in with kind of seemingly uncomfortable question or an issue, and how do you navigate that? I guess really anything, whatever is requested, but any type of training in any legal area, legal reference, legal research area.
I think that would be really useful. It's interesting because the tool of the reference interview, which is sort of designed to get at the core of an issue, it seems that overlay when dealing with legal problems or legal questions might not be the best.
It's very
instinct.
counterintuitive, I think, for a librarian to not try to dig deeper into that question. And yeah, so that was.
This idea that you're able to help set professional boundaries and language to help convey that to a patron, I think would be really useful and helpful. I also really admired that this county by county system you've done here. I think that'll be really helpful and useful for folks. And you said they can just print this right off of this URL here. That'll really be amazing. And that idea that, right, you had said, this that they can express the limitations of what they can do, but they can still have an effective transaction where they're giving something to someone to take their next steps is also really useful. I had a question about things like municipal ordinances or municipal questions. Is that outside of the scope of CLIC? Would that be something people would pursue in their town hall, or?
It really depends on the municipality.
There's that phrase, it depends.
Yeah, it depends. And yeah, so the Vermont Legal Research Guide that I mentioned earlier, there's a link for that specifically.
Great.
And then, yeah, town halls. I mean, you can talk to your town clerk about anything. They always have more information than like a librarian. A town clerk is a lot like a librarian in their own right. And so, yeah, that's like with calling CLIC, even if you're calling with what seems to be a legal question, but you don't think it is, you're just like, oh, I just need help find, that we're still there to navigate, because we have the same mentality of like leave with something. And then also I answer, so we have the email and then you can call, but it is like you leave a message and then it's sent to us. And so with that turnaround time, I do answer some of the more directional questions to kind of make sure that everyone receives a response and then is able to go to that next step. And then I pass any that we can help with specifically to the legal reference librarian. So yeah, it's all about just kind of connecting everyone, and making sure that, because we hear a lot that individuals are just kind of like, not intentionally, but just like constantly going in circles, getting sent here and then that place says, no, you go there. And they're like, I just came from that place. And so it's kind of just trying to, I guess, maybe make the lines more clear. But.
And Kassie will be joining us throughout the sort of coming year. We're going to be extending invitations to her whenever we have a table or a booth, and she'll be able to join us as her schedule allows. She has some wonderful swag and things that were highlighted here. So we have pens and magnets. We also have some brochures and things. If any of you are listening to this and you would like a little bundle, you can reach out to VitLib and we can find a way to get that to you. And again, we'll also bring those things along with us when we are. So I'm thinking maybe Kassie might want to join us at BLA and things like this. So we'll probably have some dates as the calendar becomes more settled. It's still early days in 2020 still. But we're looking for opportunities to get her out into our community and to help interface with you all more. If a group of you would ever be interested in doing another CE workshop or something more hands-on with Joy and Kassie or myself or any special population issue, we can also work with you either as a team or individually to customize that sort of training. Also, I just wanted to, we had briefly touched on some of the, I guess they're non-government agencies that might help. So for example, Vermont Legal Aid came up. Would you be able just to speak just briefly about the limitations of that service?
Yes. So Vermont Legal Aid, they have very specific programs. And there's also Legal Services Vermont. So Legal Services Vermont is who you would actually call with an issue, and then they kind of filter through the calls and then send you along to Vermont Legal Aid if you met the different requirements. Like they have a poverty law project, and so they do some elder care, the record expungement, some housing. So it really depends on where you live and what their grant is for. It is complicated, but that's what happens when you're grant funded. I can't speak for Vermont Legal Aid or Legal Services Vermont, but I know just from personal experience that they always, same thing as if you call CLIC or I'm sure go to your library, they always make sure that the individual knows where to go next or who to call or what to do. And so Vermont Legal Aid has the grant restrictions with the income requirements, same thing as the Vermont Free Legal Answers that I had mentioned. So the Vermont Bar Association has started a new program called the Modest Means Program. And so if you don't quite qualify for either of those specific programs, then this Modest Means connects you with an attorney who will give you the first 30-minute consultation for just $25. So sometimes that's a good place to start, is just talk to an attorney for 30 minutes, figure out what to do, and then, go to CLIC and do your research, and then you can come back. So there's a lot of clinics as well that are popping up, sometimes a lawyer in the library, which, if that's another thing that you're interested in, we could talk about that. And just the libraries are community centers, and so it's just important to kind of know all of the things that are going on, but it is difficult because there are a lot of things going on. So.
And also just you had mentioned the resettlement and immigration law part of the work at VLS. Just to sort of put that on your radar too, if there are new communities or issues, that might be a potential resource for folks who are navigating that very complicated and expensive process. Something else that had occurred to me when you were talking is if some of our librarians are doing some collection development in this area of legal resources, would they be able to check in with you or to see if you had any recommendations or suggestions if they're working with a small budget and maybe want to just acquire a few titles? Would that be something, not to overextend Kassie at all, just sort of kind of putting her on the spot here, but would that be something that CLIC might be able to help our librarians of practice through or offer recommendations on?
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea because it's not like you would order the same title for every library because all the issues are different in the county. So I think that's a great idea. I'm happy to talk about those things and then just kind of share what we have, and we could share statistics with, how often they're checked out.
That would be great.
That and the other stuff.
So I'm just to sort of summarize for everyone listening, CLIC is a resource in and of itself. CLIC is a place to help you refine your practice and your service. Kassie's able to do outreach and training within reason and with a certain amount of notice and all of that. And of course, we're also here to support that endeavor. If collectively it seems like a community or an area might need some concentrated effort on this. So it's one of those things where it's serving many purposes. I think it's an underutilized and wonderful resource. And so part of the dissemination process is through us into our communities. And so that's sort of part of what I was kind of thinking of, that it's a resource for you, it's a resource for your populations, and it's a space to really for some professional development and personal learning as well for you and your staff. So I think that's all pretty good. I'm not sure, Joy, did you have any other questions or things you wanted to add?
Just a question, if you can elaborate on the lawyer in the library. Would that be you, or is that something you would be available to do periodically?
Yes. I mean, it would have to be definitely discussed and figured out, just like the time or the topic and, just insurance purposes. But so that would be I'll be your lawyer in the library.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, that's very lovely. We'll take advantage of that. And that would be without a fee. They could.
Correct. Yes. And the only reason we don't do it, well, there's a few reasons we don't do it at CLIC, but CLIC is already a law school, and individuals do come thinking they can come and talk to an attorney, and that's not the case. And we also don't want to set a precedent where people think that I can go to this library here and there will be an attorney to talk to. And so that's just, beyond the scope. But yeah, a traveling attorney, because then the first Tuesday there'll be this lawyer, and a lawyer in the library could be someone fielding questions, but also coming to do little workshops, for groups of people in the community. So a lot of different creative things that you can think of when it comes to that.
And this is an evolving relationship, so we imagine we'll hear feedback from you all, things that you might need, things that listening to this may have sparked in you. And so we'll be closely coordinating together. So Joy can also handle some of those requests or questions around the CE part of law librarianship or law reference or sort of do's and don'ts.
I have a question sort of related to that. So I know, as you said, like every community is different, so they wouldn't necessarily be the same needs that they would have. But if someone were to have like a core, small collection of legal resources, like print ones, and I'm thinking small public library, so they're very discreet probably. But I mean, would there be a few things that even a small library really should have a print copy of something in their shelves?
On the spot. That's a good question.
Well, I would say, is Black's still a Black's Law Dictionary?
Black's Law Dictionary.
That one I think is probably a good one, just because I think vernacular and terms of art and all of that I think are important.
Yeah, because you walk it, maybe a client or a patron, I would say patron comes in and has this document, and that's first things first. Like, what do these words mean in the legal context? I think that kind of simple, estate planning, I think, is something that every single person needs or is affected by. Just basic contracts, kind of like those NOLO books. You can scan and use the contracts. I would say the Vermont statutes annotated, but those are expensive to maintain. Even most attorneys don't have them. Yeah, and but
we maintain those here too, right? So should folks need them, or we can be part of that process as well. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these resources, and Kassie sort of touched on this a little bit, the aggregating databases in particular are quite expensive. So the on-site access is really important. A half an hour drive or a 40-minute drive is, by comparison, to get access to something like LexisNexis, or which would be much more expensive. So there's a cost-benefit analysis that comes with that. It's not convenient in the sense that you can authenticate from your home or from maybe your own library, but it's convenient in terms of maybe the overall cost savings for the kind of access that you're getting.
Yes, very good point.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And please look for us. Oh, great.
Yes.
Yay! It's really nice swag.
Yes.
And the flash drives are especially popular. I can confirm.
And we have copies of the Constitution in both French and English. I am looking to order Spanish. Or I'm sorry, no, they're in Spanish and Spanish and English, and I'm looking to order French.
Okay.
Either way, all three languages that I've just listed twice will be available.
Well, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, until next time, folks.